hurricane can cause widespread devastation during its occurrence. Planning and preparing can make a big difference in safety and resiliency in the wake of a hurricane. The ability to recover quickly following a hurricane requires focus on preparedness, advanced planning, and knowing what to do in the event of a hurricane. The passage of a hurricane is one of the most intense times anyone can experience. It is important to be as prepared as can be. The Department of Communication, as part of Emergency Support Function Group 8, in continuing our efforts to ensure public knowledge and safety, addressed the importance of being ready during a storm with key stakeholders who provided information on the concerns faced during a storm. Dcomm spoke to Patrick Dreifers, Head of Distribution for NVGEBE and ESF1, about the process GB enacts before the storm concerning water and electricity and what some of the other concerns are that persons should be vigilant of during a storm.
What should one do if encountered down or hanging power lines?
Well, first of all, never ever go in contact and touch the cables. That's the first rule of thumb with any electrical appliance that you would see out, or utility that you would see out on the road. If it is down on the ground, first thing you would do is call NVGEBE for them to come and either de-energize the cable or remove the cable from the location that it is, because we would not know if there's power on it, yes or no. Most of the time the protection devices switch the power off, but it can be that it doesn't happen and that you have live cables on the ground. So whatever you do not touch those cables.
In order to protect against possible voltage irregularities, what is advisable?
Well, there are different types of irregularities. You have the natural ones. Natural regularities are, for example, trees growing in your power lines, animals sitting on your power lines as well. Rain, heavy rain, and also heavy winds. Whereas the overhead lines that are, what we still have in service are overhead exposed copper lines. And once they touch each other, they can cause a short. Causing the short causes irregularity in your system. It causes a spike within your system. That's one of the natural causes. You have also non-natural, meaning errors, man errors or human errors. When a backhoe, for example, digs and hits a cable and it shorts out, you also get irregularity. From the other side, also from let me say the client side, you also have that the wires are inadequate in the home, or you have bad connections in your home. For example, in your breaker box, for example, your cables are connected to your breaker. Your breaker, maybe your screw is not tightened properly, and you will have a short in between the cable and the breaker. Another irregularity is use of appliances on one circuit or one outlet, too many of them. You have, like, for example, your toaster oven, your hair dryer, and those type of equipment causes, of course, high peaks because they use a lot of electricity to warm the element in the appliance, and that could create irregularity as well. Then how you notice that there's an irregularity, the lights start to flicker or to dim. So the advice is then to, instead of using that power source or that outlet, to use a different outlet within the home. And then you also have that, for example, GB would have, of course, an issue with a fuse that is blown in their system on the high voltage side or on the low voltage side. So those are other irregularities that can happen and gives you what you call issues within the home as well.
How big of a problem is carbon monoxide associated with the use of generators?
Carbon monoxide kills. So we got to just make it clear. Too much of that, you're dead. So that's the reason why we always advise do not start any generators inside of a home. Make sure that the place wherever you're wherever you're going to start it is well ventilated, or basically put it outside. But when you're putting it outside, of course, you got to protect it from the elements. You don't need water hitting it, because if water hits it, of course, it then shorts out, and you don't want your generator to short out. That again creates irregularities. So wherever you put it, make sure it's a well-vented location so that the carbon monoxide could be taken with the flow of the air and not into your home.
With hurricanes, at times also comes lightning storms. What should I do if I am caught outside?
Well, first thing, get inside. Do not go and hide under a tree. The tree is one of the elements that sticks out and can be hit by lightning. Even if that is hit by lightning, you can be struck by lightning and be executed. Or if it hits the tree and a branch falls off, it can fall on you. I would not advise anyone to open an umbrella in lightning storms because, of course, that's again a rod that can be a cause of electrocution. Hiding under a bus stop or maybe on someone's porch, if you can get to it, is one of the top things to do, or just simply get inside.
In reference to water and electricity distribution to the clients, what is GB's policy when a hurricane is approaching?
Well, first of all, for the electricity part, we have two types of electricity. We have high voltage and we have low voltage. The first thing that is disconnected or de-energized is the high voltage. We have several areas, I think it's 3 areas still, that still have overhead high voltage cables. Because right now we have about between 95 and 97% of the high voltage is underground. That is the first that we de-energize. It's approximately about 8 hours before the storm hits that we de-energize the overhead high voltage. Low voltage overhead is basically protected because it's not bare copper wire, and so if it stays on, it doesn't really cause such an impact. If it shorts out on the fuse, so then it is de-energized. That is on the electricity side. The power plant now only decommissions when the storm is too high and they cannot control or let me say be responsible or held let me say for the integrity of the building. Once the integrity of the building is going to be impacted, then they shut all generators down. And again, it depends on the intensity of the storm. The water situation, we try and fill all tanks at full level, say 24 hours before the storm. What we try and do, depending again on the speed of the storm, not the velocity of the storm, or the speed of the storm, we have a time span between 26 and 24 hours that we shut the tanks off to the public. It doesn't mean that the public doesn't have water. Water is still being transported, distributed to the clients, as we call it. We bypass the tanks, but we close the tanks off from going and feeding the clients. Once the 8-hour breach has reached, or let me say 8 o'clock in the evening has reached, we shut all tanks off, all water production or distribution to the clients. And this is to safeguard not only the storage in the tanks, but also, of course, the livelihood of the personnel of GB. You don't want them caught into the storm as well. If the storm is very severe, we do have water trucks available. So we fill up right here at the distribution station. We fill the trucks up, and then we carry the water to specific locations in the districts that people could come and fill water jugs and for their household, for drinking possibilities. GB's water is safe to drink, basically at all times, until of course noticed or mentioned on our Facebook page or made public that it's not possible to drink the water, but it's drinkable at all times. I would advise the public, of course, to fill the jugs. For example, 10, let's say, you could say about 12 hours before the storm. Make sure that all jugs are full. Water is basically usable for at least and drinkable for 3 days. We try and keep our water storage also for approximately 3 days. But of course, anything over that, we advise boil the water before either drinking it or just use the water for washing clothes, showering, or cooking.
During a storm, some of the most vulnerable people need assistance. Prior to a storm, families are urged to ensure the seniors and most vulnerable of their families are safe and all needs are taken into consideration. Fenna Arnell, head of the Department of Health, stressed about the precautions citizens should take when a hurricane is about to make landfall.
Once a hurricane is threatened, then the Emergency Operations Center goes into effect, and the disasters then the Prime Minister then determines whether or not the country is under threat for disaster. Once that has taken place, we then meet with our emergency support function group members, and we ensure that the disaster plans of every emergency support function is activated. What does that mean? It means medical center, downsize, ensure that your vulnerable patients are protected, ensure that those that are capable of going home, that they are sent home, so that your responsibility at that moment is also smaller. What does it mean for the pharmacies? You make sure that the vaccinations are properly stored, and that collective prevention service as well. We make sure that our vaccinations are properly stored, that after the storm, in the event we would need any vaccinations, they are available. They have not been destroyed. What does it mean for the lab? We ensure that all of our material that is needed for proper lab services as it relates to testing water after the storm, that is also properly protected, and that we can begin the process immediately after the storm has passed.
What steps would the public health advise the general public to take when the island is facing a direct threat?
At that time, it's go in motion. Basically, all the planning you did throughout the year, you make sure that you have your kit ready, you make sure that you have a listing of nearby shelters, you make sure that you have all emergency numbers saved in your phone, make sure that you have sufficient drinking water and non-perishable goods for at least a week per individual in your household. You make sure that you have your medicine, that's available, that you have a stock of medication for 2 weeks for the chronically ill patients. For the ladies, make sure you have your sanitary napkins. That thing comes under the most stressful moments, so we have to make sure we're always prepared. First aid kits, make sure that they are well stocked and up to date. For those that have toddlers at home, make sure we have the sufficient diapers, make sure we have sufficient baby formula. For those with the elderly, they need to be extra hydrated and extra, so keep an eye out on them as well. And basically your emergency kit then should be ready at that particular time with those items.
And what steps do public health advise vulnerable persons to take in preparation for the threatening of a hurricane?
Vulnerable persons we break down into, for instance, your elderly, your toddlers, diabetics, dialysis patients. Now, as I stated earlier, with your elderly and your toddlers, hydration is key. You ensure that you have sufficient fluid, sufficient water, and you ensure that they eat on time, that they maintain the diet that is required as much as possible. When it comes to your diabetics and your dialysis, same goes, because it's important to maintain your diet as much as possible. So follow your doctor's instruction, because every individual has a specific care and treatment plan. But in general, keep hydrated. In general, make sure that you eat on time, and make sure that you follow as much as possible all of the doctor's instructions that are provided to you. Your emergency kit would be the same as for the general public, but you have to ensure that your medication is up to date. Again, picture of your medication for the elderly who probably may not remember the name of the medication or the doses of their medication. Take a picture of the prescription or the sticker on your medication box. Take a picture of it so that whichever doctor is available directly after a storm, in the event your medication was lost or damaged, you can show them a picture, and it makes it so much easier for the physician to then take care of you after the storm.
There are many possibilities during a storm for citizens to encounter injuries. Unfortunately, EMS personnel are not mobile during a storm. It is important to be abreast of home remedies and tactics that can be of a lifesaver during a storm. Dcomm spoke to Sylward Richardson, head of the ambulance department, about what can be done when injuries or health issues arise during a storm.
During a storm, there's going to come a time that the emergency personnel would not be able to launch out. However, we also have a dispatch center where we have dispatchers on duty, and they would also be able, if the phone system is up and running, they will be able to give life-saving techniques to individuals to explain to them what to do in such an event. One of the things that someone can do if hurt during a storm, a cut or anything, the intention is for them to apply, if they have bandages at home, that they apply bandages to the cut, or if not, that they use certain home remedies. For example, even using a sheet, a cloth, they can tie off the area where the cut is, depending if it's profusely bleeding, so that they can stop the bleeding.
And what are some of the most common injuries sustained during a storm? What are some of the reports received during a storm of injuries?
Well, reports that we would receive here is, during a hurricane, you know, there's a lot of flying debris, etc. People get choked with nail chokes they would get. Besides that, flying debris, certain people at times would get a traumatic, so they get hit with maybe a lumber or a piece of flying debris, etc. But most commonly is cuts and bruises that we would see at times, and also nail chokes.
And what is the procedure for remedying a nail choke?
One of the things that a lot of us would do at home, because you're not being able to visit a hospital at that point in time. Some people I know would apply garlic and will just tie it off, or you apply a bandage for the time being, and when you're able to seek medical help, definitely it would be recommended that a person gets a tetanus shot.
For the at-risk patients, what are the necessities during a storm?
Well, one of the things that the at-risk patients should always try to have in place is their medication. If they are suffering from whatever ailment, to have their medication up to par. The supplies, so that, and a next thing that I would advise, for example, diabetic patients to also have the insulin and to store it properly in a cold box, etc. Store it in a cold box, so that even after the storm, if there is no electricity, at least that insulin would be good for a period of time.
What procedure or strategic plan does the ambulance department have set in place for the assistance of persons injured during a storm?
Well, during a storm, as we just mentioned, it's very difficult for the ambulance to go out at the point in time that it's deemed unsafe. That is a problem. Over the years, what we have seen is that a lot of people at times does not pay attention to things like that, and then they think that when you call the ambulance is going to just respond. What we have in place definitely is the dispatch. The dispatch center keeps operational, and they are able to give life-saving techniques to the individuals who might call the dispatch for whatever type of emergency that they might be facing.
And what is that dispatch number for those that are unfamiliar with it?
The dispatch number is 911, and as you all know, that the ambulance and the police is in that central dispatch.
Hurricane Irma left many with heart-wrenching stories to tell. Dcomm was able to connect with some individuals who were able to share their stories with us.
Well, I was stationed with my family at the fire department because as my profession, head of repression, I needed to be at the fire station. So that was very difficult because we didn't know what was happening. Me and my other colleagues, we tried to save the fire department as much as could, material and other things. Or we also, the next day, I went out with the Marines to check my house. Well, my house was totally ruined in the sense that the roof was gone, all the things were wet, so I had to throw away a lot of things. But we had to go back to the fire station to deal with the whole situation. The other thing is that a lot of guys came to the fire station to sleep there. So there was a difficult period for me and my family, but we did pretty okay. After 3 days, I went home again to look at the whole situation, because the first day I had a look, but I couldn't do much. So I went back 3 days later, and then I saw the total damage that was there, and that was really difficult because my wife couldn't go out there and I was the only one. So we cleaned up the whole thing, and then I had to go back to the station. But the difficult part was that I had my own emotions, but also the guy had their emotions. But as being the manager or the leader or whatever, I could not show too much of myself, because I also had to listen to their story. And there were difficult times, because sometimes at night they knocked on my door to have a discussion to see how I could help them. So that was a difficult time, but we with the family and the fire department, we managed. The lessons learned are that you're only human, and you have to take in consideration that you also have grief. And it's no big deal that you show that grief also to your colleagues. At certain moments you cannot do that, but sometimes you have to do it. And the other thing is, what I learned is stick with your team. I did that, and that was a lesson for me that if it would happen again, I would do the same thing. So that is a lesson learned from Irma.
My experience during Hurricane Irma was like unbelievable. It was my first time experiencing a hurricane like that, or a major hurricane. When my mother first heard that the hurricane was coming, she was actually off island, and then it was just me and my brother home. So we started like packing our stuff, because you had to get ready, move our stuff to my aunt's house on the Dutch side, which was a concrete house. And then we moved the stuff. My mother had came back on the island the day the hurricane was supposed to come. And most of the stuff we put in a container, and that was it. I was thinking if we were gonna die, or like how would life be after the hurricane, if we would still get to go to school, if there would still be places for people to work at, and if we would even have food or enough food after the days after hurricane.
In 2017, the day before Hurricane Irma, we were supposed to be celebrating my daughter's birthday. And that was cut short because we had to prepare our home before the storm come. And I was also not feeling well. And during the course of the day, we were kind of anxious, wanting to know what's going on, because everyone was pounding. And as a single mom, I'm not familiar with preparing your house with board or anything of the sort. So I had to call friends over to come and assist me, which they did. And then we tried to wait out the storm. And during the course of the evening, we had current until pretty late. And that was our entertainment, because it was my daughter's birthday. And when current went, then is when the whole experience started. It started with me first. The whole sliding door with the wood and everything came in. Everything just mashed up. Things were flying. I found myself caught between two doors, trying to save my friend that came over to help me to bar up, and my daughter safe inside the room. So I was caught between the bathroom door and the bedroom door, watching the wind take everything from one end of the house out through the front door, down the stairs. And yeah, that happened to me for a good hour, 2 hours, until the eye came. When the eye came, I heard a neighbor outside calling out to see if everybody was okay. By then, I had no shoes on, so I ended up getting splinters in my feet. And I told my child and my friend who was in the bathroom, my friend was in the bathroom, my child was in the bedroom, and I told them, get themselves organized. We have to go somewhere safe, because everything out here is damaged and horrible, and we have to step over everything. So they came out, and when they came out, they were crying and frightened. And we went outside and we went to a neighbor's house, because we live on the second floor and my neighbor is on another building, the third floor. We went to their house and we stayed there with them. And we had another experience there where they had to be holding the door, 3 big men holding the door so they wouldn't fly out with all of us. You know, it was a very hard and unusual experience. I've been through Lewis, but Irma was, a different experience.
As we come to the end of the peak of the hurricane season, it is the hope that we are spared for the rest of the hurricane season. However, we must always try to be as prepared as possible on an individual basis, family affairs level, and as a country. Don't wait until it's too late. Let us all be prepared.